Okay, if you have your Bible, go ahead and open it to the book of Ephesians, which if you don't know where that is, maybe about 80% of the way through or so. We are well into the second half of the book now, where we've seen how chapters 1 through 3, the truth there produces a changed life, chapters 4 through 6. And out of the gate, the emphasis has been on community specifically, right? So chapter 4, 1 through 6, loving one another with humility, with gentleness, with patience, for the sake of unity. Last week, it was about serving one another with our spiritual gifts in truth and love for the sake of maturity, okay? Each one of us in this room has been specifically gifted by God's grace so that we can minister to other people with truth and love. Like you have things I need, I have things you need, and together we build each other up, right? Nobody grows in isolation. And in fact, when you're not running in your lane, when you're not contributing to the body, we're weaker as a result. But when you are, we are stronger. That's what we saw last week. Now, today, Paul is going to pivot to a bit more personal with this changed life. So I want to pivot also, and I want to talk about uniforms. How many of you guys have to wear a uniform for your job? Any specific type of, police, healthcare people I see, nurse, right, doctors, military, there you go, military pilots there, I see you guys. You have something specific that you have to put on in order for people to recognize you and know this is your role, right? What you are wearing communicates something about what you do. That's usually how it works. Now, other times people mistake what we wear for something that we do. Like when people ask me if I'm a runner. All the time. And I'm like, no, I hate to run. Why do you ask? And they usually say something about my clothes. But what they really mean is that, hey, dude, you're scrawny and I want to buy you a steak. Right? Like, let's be honest. Like, watch the Olympics. All long-distance runners are like toothpicks, okay? So that's the look, I guess, that I'm going for. Now, have you ever had to wear a uniform that you hated? Like, that you just really, really didn't like? Like, you like the job, but putting on those clothes really bothered you. I definitely have. I want to take you back to 1995. Michael Jordan was making his comeback. Mariah Carey was dominating the charts. DVDs were invented. And the internet was really, really taking off. Windows 95, anybody remember that? Now, in my world, I was about to begrudgingly agree to one of my biggest life regrets. Being in the Nutcracker. I love you guys a lot to share this. Not enough to show pictures, though. Sorry. Yeah. I saw those eyes going up. Nope, not today. Not today. My sister was eating, sleeping, and breathing ballet. My parents got recruited into it as well, which just left me. Now, I wasn't old enough to be home alone, even though I had watched Macaulay Culkin do it, and I had a lot of good reasons why my parents should let me do the same. I was left with no choice, okay? So, I hope I'm making this really clear. This wasn't my thing. This was my sister's thing. Even though today I'm married to a person with a ballet degree, I'm no ballerino, okay? Yet there I was, a party boy. And the worst part, I guess the second worst part of that worst part is obviously the makeup. The second worst part is what I had to wear. This uniform was old and dingy and it's like a muggy sweatsuit. It was terrible. And it smelled really, really bad. Like awful, awful smell. Like combined, think like junior high locker room meets funeral home. Okay? With of course, Bath and Body Works sprinkled all over it, right? To try to cover it. It was terrible. I just wanted the thing off. What I was wearing wasn't me. Wasn't me, right? It was a uniform, but it did not fit who I was. That's similar language we're going to see in today's passage. And as we look, I want you to consider two things. Number one, which lifestyle today am I more like? You guys have been to the eye doctor and they do the whole 1, 2, 1, 2. We're going to see 1 and 2 today. Which one looks more like you? And second, what do I want to change in my life? Hopefully, you're sitting here today going, I don't want to be the same person in 10 years or 10 months or a week from now that I am today. What specific areas might the Lord highlight for you today that he wants to change in you, that you want to change So here we go. Ephesians 4, verse 17. Now, this I say, and I testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. Well, hold up. Aren't they still Gentiles? Well, yeah, they haven't become Jews yet. So what is the sense of this Gentile word? Well, here in a sense, it means essentially godless, okay? Godless. People who don't know God. We might just say it here as non-Christian today. That's the way that Jesus uses it in Matthew 6, when he says, hey, don't worry about what you eat and drink. Don't be anxious. What? Like the Gentiles do. No, you have a Father in heaven who knows what you need, right? It's like, hey, don't live as if you don't know God. That's the same thing Paul is saying here. Like you used to walk this way. You were dead in your sins and transgressions, but not anymore. You are different, and therefore you have a new walk. Now, I love this because Christianity is not just a set of beliefs, right? It's not just intellectual ideas or facts that we memorize. What is it? It's a way of life. It saturates and infuses your actions and your thoughts and your values. Whoa, are we okay? Okay, all right. To where it's really permeating all that you do. It's a lifestyle, not just a set of beliefs. Now, okay, what does a godless lifestyle look like? What did Gentiles' walk look like? Let's take a look. Walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. Okay, what you think about, what you focus on, your whole worldview and mental mindset is futile. It's empty. It's like a dead end, Paul is saying. 1 Corinthians 3 says it this way: the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, quotation marks, the wise in the world, and that they are futile. So every human longs for fulfillment, right? But human wisdom is ineffective in actually accomplishing that fulfillment. It's results-less. Why? Because we're going to see in the next verse, because it doesn't know God, right? The person who doesn't know God has extracted God out of their thinking, and so that their plans and their ideas and their analysis are all void of God. Their career decisions and their ethical stances and their conclusions about money and neighbors and justice and nature. It's how you interpret scientific data and what you believe will happen after you die and what you think will actually make you happy. All of it godless. And he goes nowhere. Verse 18, he's going to break it down further. Look at what he says. They are darkened in their understanding, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them. Okay, so what's the progression? Ignorance. They don't know God, right? Might know a lot of things, a lot of facts, but God is out of the equation. And when he's out of the equation, it's like not having a true north compass. They don't know God, and therefore they're alienated from the life of God. This is Genesis 3 language. We are separated from the garden of God, his very presence, cut off by sin. And therefore, this is not just about not knowing something, it's about not having access to life. Fellowship with God has been severed, and now someone's thinking is dead and dark. Look, it produces dark understanding. It's led to a faulty way of concluding and interpreting the world, right? Imagine a malfunctioning operating system. That's our mind apart from God. And it's Paul saying, as if you were walking through a dark cave and there were no lights. You are mentally blind. See the same progression in Romans 1. Look at Romans 1:21 specifically. For although they knew of God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became, there it is, futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay, so it's not always this overt opposition. I hate God. That's not what it always looks like. Look how subtle it is here. It's the silent lack of acknowledgement. They refuse to honor God. They refuse to rejoice in his good character. They refuse to honor and give thanks to him. This is futile thinking. And it's the first place that he goes when describing a walk or a lifestyle without God. He goes to our thinking. Why? Because how we live stems from how we think. Now, our thinking is not the root problem, though. Okay? Imagine our thinking as the trunk of the tree. We have to go deeper to get to the actual root of our faulty thinking. Look where he goes next. Due to what? Their hardness of heart. Okay, now we've arrived at the base layer. And as always, what? The heart of the matter is a matter of the heart. Yes, exactly. Our fundamental problem, a closed mind to God, comes from a hard heart towards God. Now, this word hard heart is all over the Bible, right? If you know your Old Testament, this isn't just for Gentiles. The Israelites consistently had a hard heart. What does it mean? It means a stubborn, self-reliant posture of pride. It says, I have no need of God. I got this. I'm good on my own. It is a deliberate refusal and resistance to help. Ooh, what a phrase, a resistance to help. And there's a sliding scale of a hard heart, but a fundamental factor, a distinguishing factor at the core is that it is a desensitization to God. That's what the next phrase says. It calloused, right? They were calloused. They don't feel. You stop feeling godly grief towards sin. You start feeling joy and gladness over God's truth and goodness. At the core, you are apathetic, desensitized towards God. It makes me think of Mark chapter 3. Jesus on the Sabbath heals a man with a withered hand. And you would think everyone there would be praising God, clapping, acknowledging what they have just witnessed. No, not the religious leaders. They were silent, waiting to accuse Jesus. And after this miracle right in front of them, they walk out and begin to plot how to destroy Jesus. They see Jesus, and yet they refuse him. Rather than coming to him for their own help, they're threatened by him. This is hardness of heart. Jesus, it says that grieved over their hardness of heart. Over time, when we consistently deny our need for God, it leads to a hard, callous heart. And in that loss of sensitivity, look what happens. Actions inevitably follow. Verse 19. They become callous and they have given themselves up. It means literally to hand over to an authority. It's like when someone was arrested or delivered into prison. They have willingly given themselves up to the slavery of sin. Okay, now what kind of sin? Sensuality. Interesting. What a word. This is a word that is for a reckless seeking of pleasure. Now, usually the majority of the uses of this word are connected specifically to unrestrained sexual indulgence, lust, lewdness, every kind of sexual immorality under that umbrella. Where God has designed this beautiful gift to be enjoyed between a husband and wife, sensuality takes that gift and uses it on its own terms, however it wants. It distorts it. It tries to get God's good gifts without God. Okay? So, as I talk about this, I know in a room this size, many of us, we gotta be careful, because we can easily hear, sensuality over, highly unrestrained sexual lust, and you automatically think, that's not me. Great, I'm not crazy like those people, right? And we begin to tune out and go, this isn't about me. Well, hold on here. There is a major sliding scale. It doesn't always mean something overt like a raging frat party, okay? Sensuality is often far more subtle and equally deadly. There's a universe of sexuality on Netflix and Instagram. It shows up in our music, in our lingering thoughts, in our immodest dressing, in our mirror obsessing, in our craving of emotionally gratifying conversations. We have to see this hard-hearted, bad-thinking, impure life of sensuality is not immune to white-collar jobs or workout gyms or school classrooms or suburban family-valued homes or even church. We've got to examine our hearts and go, where's the sensuality in my life? Now, there's more to this word, because I kept asking this week, why this word? Why does he use this word? Like, do you notice this? He doesn't give a list of 7 or 8 things. Here's the godless life, like he does in other parts. He just gives one word. Why? Well, I think 3 reasons. Number 1, he's talking specifically to the Ephesians. Now, remember, this was sermon 1, a big part of their past. In the center of the city is the temple of Artemis, the Greek goddess of fertility. This was a wealthy and highly sexualized culture, which I know is hard for us today in America to kind of relate to, okay? But if you can for a moment remember, put yourself in their shoes. There's something specific. He's going, hey, this was your old way of life, right? Now, at a more generic level, our sexuality is often a good snapshot of our sanctification, okay? Let me show you this. 1 Thessalonians 3:3-5. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, your growth in holiness, your maturity, that you abstain from sexual immorality, right? No list again, just this one. That each of you know how to control their own body in holiness and honor, not in passionate lust like the Gentiles who don't know God. So in some way, if you want to get a glimpse of someone or of a culture's sanctification, of where they're at with God, just look at their sexuality. Are they self-controlled? Honoring their body to the Lord, viewing sex as he does, staying within his joyful good designs, or is there a redefinition of things, a craving pursuit of pleasure, a gratification for your body, or a validation of your body? That's a key ingredient in a changed life, Paul is saying. There's a 3rd reason. This is where it goes deeper. At the base root of the word sensuality is what? Senses. It's not always a sexual word. It really just means doing whatever feels good. Look at the next phrase. Greedy to practice every kind of impurity. Every kind, see? All kinds. This is not exclusive to sexuality. It is a pursuit of any gratification that feels good. Like, that's your rubric at the end of the day. That's how you make decisions in life. Does this feel good? If so, I'm going to do it. Which is a horrible way to live, right? It doesn't take long if we actually stop to see the massive holes in that type of thinking. It might feel good to type that comment. It might feel good to not show up to work, right? It might feel good to medicate that pain with that substance, or stay up too late, or spend that money, or hoard that money, numb out on the couch, or refuse to forgive that person, or punch that person, or yell at the TV. Never done that. I've never done that. It might feel good, but that can't be our basis for decisions, right? Like, apply that to food real quick. If it tastes good, eat it. Well, take your teenage taste buds and play that out, right? Like, it might taste good in the moment, but eating an entire pillowcase of Skittles is not going to turn out good, right? There's some immediate and there's some long-term damage there. Sin seems good, might even feel good, might even give you a little bit of pleasure in the moment, but eventually it produces destructive outcomes for you and for others, right? So in this sense, there's tons of ways to live sensually, with money, with our career decisions, with relationships, with food, with escapes and entertainment, even theologically, like we talked last fall about what? Progressive gospel. We could go to prosperity gospel. All these false teachings are preying on what? Oh, that sounds good. Oh, that feels good. That makes me feel better. But it's a quick hit without long-term help, right? If that's our grid for life, then we're going to struggle because it's short-sighted. It just wants immediate gratification, but it doesn't see the long-term effects. Not only that, but there's a second problem with this type of thinking. Our senses are off, right? We've already said that we're desensitized to God and we have dark understanding. Why would I trust what I feel is good? My ability to judge that is jacked up. And so there is a massive gap between what feels good and what is good. You track and you see in that, this is why, let's go to verse 22. He's going to summarize later on what this old life was like, and look what he uses. Look at this term. Put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires. Wow, what a phrase. This is what sin is, a deceiving of our desire. It tries to twist what is good, or what is not good, into actually feeling good. Isn't this exactly what happened in Genesis 3? Eve sees the fruit. She desires it. This is good. Maybe God's holding out on me. Maybe his command isn't really good. I now want this. And what does she say in verse 13 when God comes to talk with her? The serpent deceived me. Now she's blaming, but she's accurate. There was a deceitful desire in her. That is the core of what sin is. It is not truth, it is a lie. Look at James 1, it helps us see this. Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. There's the terrible progression, the trap. Now, verse 16. Do not be deceived. Right? And where does he go? Every good and perfect gift comes from God. Let me remind you and redefine for you what is actually good. It's found in God. This is a deceitful desire. This will bait you into wanting something that is not good, promising to deliver it only to fail and leave a devastating fallout. Sometimes in a moment, and ruin comes on us where just minutes can change lifetimes, but usually far more slow and crafty. Sin hooks us long-term with an addiction, usually some form of hit, right? Like sin gives some kind of measure of pleasure to keep us coming back and to kind of run interference and hide the fact that it's missing and lacking something. If it was obvious, we'd spot the fraud, right? Like I'm sure Eve's fruit tasted good. But in the end, the deceit keeps going because we just think, what's the problem? We just need more. We just need more. Maybe I just don't have enough. I need a bigger dosage, a further level, a higher frequency, a larger stash, and then I will be satisfied. That's why the next phrase says, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. Greedy, coveting, idling, obsessing. I gotta have more. But listen, sin is insatiable, right? That's what Paul's showing for us. It's unsatisfying. It's empty. It does not deliver because what feels good isn't what is good. Jeremiah 2, I love this verse, helps us see the deceit here. God says this, they have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So let me say it this way. Sin is going to an empty well, expecting to get water. Right? Now notice what's all implicit in this. This is really massive for us today. Having desires in and of themselves are not the problem. It's the calibration of those desires. Are we desiring what is good or just what feels good? So catch this. As Christians, we're not anti-joy. We're not anti-passion. We're not anti-pleasure. Christianity is not killing your desires. It's simply recalibrating our desires to what is actually good. What is actually going to satisfy. Are you seeing that? It's seeing through the deceit. Because listen, every human, godless or not, wants the same things. Happiness, love, peace, purpose, future hope, life, rescue from death. All these things that were found in the garden. All these things that were lost when humanity sinned. All these things that Jesus came to redeem and ultimately when he comes back to fully restore. We all want the same things. One category of people are looking for those things outside of God. One category has found them in God. One goes to an empty well. One has found the never-ending water of life. This is really key. Following Jesus does not mean this grit your teeth, ascetic, just going to deny myself pleasure kind of life. Wait, Tyler, what about the self-denial in the Bible, what Jesus says? Jesus talked about that. Deny yourself, follow me. Yeah, it's the denying of the old self with its deceitful desires that don't actually satisfy, and so that you can embrace the true superior pleasure of following Jesus. That's the point. Putting off the old self and putting sin to death is never a downgrade. We're saying no to this because we have a better yes. That is what is following Jesus. It is finding forever satisfaction in what is actually good. So if you think about that, it's some really helpful, hopeful words for us, right? As we think about our growth as a process of sanctification, really sanctification is just a recalibrating of our desires. Having what feels good start to be aligned with what is good, okay? So back to the taste buds, it's like they change over time, right? Like I can't drink Dr. Pepper anymore. Oh, I know, right? I used to love Dr. Pepper, man, but I started changing my diet, and now there's 40 grams per can. It's just too much of sugar. Right? I can't do it. It feels syrupy and it doesn't sit well. And I just can't do it anymore. Same with Brahms. Oh my gosh, I used to have 7 tubs of ice cream in my freezer at one time. Right? It was like a nightly ritual for me. But as the diet changed, guess what? I just can't do that anymore. Now listen, I'm not equating Brahms ice cream to sin, okay? Let's be clear. Let's be clear. That delectable Oklahoma goodness will probably be in heaven, okay? Just in a redeemed way, all right? I look forward to that. But over time, our taste buds change to what is actually good. No kids begging for Brussels sprouts. If your kid is, then you should teach a class, okay? But what happens is it's over time we start to actually want what is actually good. And until our taste buds have adapted, we do what? We avoid that substance, and we avert our eyes, and we heed that counsel. And we get up in the morning to get in the Word, even when it doesn't feel good. Because we are convinced in faith that it is good. And that as we do this, our desires, our taste buds will calibrate and change. Does that make sense? Are you tracking with that? Okay. So overall, here's the summary of the godless life. It starts with a hard heart, self-reliance, right, that excludes God from life, callous desensitization that moves to a futile mind, a faulty thinking that leads to a reckless life. That's the progression. Hard heart, futile mind, reckless life. That's the downward road of sin, and it is bleak and it is horrible, but it is not hopeless. Because if you see that progression, what has to happen first? What's the primary goal? Is it to change our actions? No. Is it to change our thinking? No, not yet. It is what? Change the heart. Now, if you're a Christian in the room, guess what has already happened? Yeah. You were dead, but God made you alive, chapter 2, right? So the fundamental problem has already been taken care of. You have a new heart. So let's go to verse 21. Verse 20. But that is not the way you learned Christ, right? This picture isn't you. This depraved person is no longer you. You know Jesus. And the imagery here is of a school. This is education language. Where are my teachers at in the room? Let's go. Yeah, you can be proud. Come on. Shout out from Jesus right here, okay? This is your moment. Now, what's your goal in education? It's learning. You love to see the light bulb click for students. Turns on, and they grasp something. They learn. Now, notice what we're learning here. It doesn't say we learn about Jesus. It says we learn Jesus. This is unprecedented language. Like never before at this point in history in the entire Greek language, inside the Bible or outside the Bible, is this construction of learning a person. Never. This is the first. Isn't that what Christianity is? We're not learning curriculum. We're not steeping ourselves in philosophy, ideas. We're knowing a man. We're knowing a person. This is a relationship that is occurring. Chapter 3, to comprehend, to learn, to know, to understand what the height and the depth and the length and the breadth of what the love of Jesus. You've learned him, right? The core of the gospel is a person. He's the subject, but Jesus is also the teacher. It says, assuming that you have heard about him. So plenty of false teachers have come in, right? And Paul wants to make sure, hey, I want to make sure you've heard the real Jesus, the one that I delivered to you when I came and lived with you for 3 years. Now, in the Greek, about is not there. It's just assuming that you have heard him. Meaning, you heard his voice directly. He's teaching you, which makes sense. If he's the subject, he's also the teacher. We're learning from him as our rabbi. Now, third, he's also the school, and you were taught in him. We're not just learning him. We're not just learning from him. We're learning in him. He's the context or the environment of our learning. In other words, this is not an isolated subject. All of our understanding is interconnected through Jesus. That's because, number 4, Jesus is not just the subject, not just the teacher, not just the school. He is the truth. See that phrase? As the truth is in Jesus. He's not just a subject, he's all subjects. He is the standard, the very basis of knowledge. When you come to Jesus, you come to truth. Paul is showing us today 2 ways to live. One that is in step with the truth, and one that is opposite of the truth, that is futile in thinking, darkened in understanding, with deceitful and ignorant desires. Now then, what does he say? Put off this false life. Verse 22, right? Put off, lay aside, cast away. This is the very word in Acts chapter 7 when they dragged Stephen outside the city and stoned him to death. Which, by the way, Paul was therefore leading the charge, right? And here he is decades later as a saved new Christian saying, that's what you have to do with your old life. Drag it out behind the barn and execute it. Put it to death. Why? Because that's your former life. That's who you used to be, right? Just like he's talking about his own life. He used to hunt down Christians. He used to put all his pride and value and worth in how self-righteous he was and how good he was at following the religious rules, but not anymore. Galatians 1:13, that's my former life. Now he's telling the Ephesians, this is your former life. Oh, what a phrase, church. The gift of a former life. That used to be me. No longer is. You Ephesians were idle boasting. You were wealth trusting and luxury loving, comfort seeking and Rome adoring and sex indulging and entertainment craving, but not anymore. But God stepped in. Jesus interrupted your story and he gave you a former life. Has he not done the same for us? Yeah, that's why we're here this morning, right? That's why we're here. To rejoice and celebrate that, to recalibrate our minds to that reality that we have a past tense. And who we used to be is no longer who we are. Put on the new self. You have a new self. That doesn't mean like a better version of yourself, like new year, new you, okay? This is 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is what? A new creation. The old, it's gone. And the new has come. The moment Jesus saves us, we fundamentally become different and are set free from that dead and hard hearts. Look at that next phrase too. Created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. You're a new creation with true and righteous desires rather than deceitful ones. Remember, this is what Ephesians 2:10 talked about, right? created in Christ Jesus for good works, that you should walk in them. We have a new self, and this new self is our true self. Like this imagery of being created after the likeness of God, that's Genesis 1 and 2. The image of God that was distorted by sin is now being restored in Jesus. You are becoming who you were designed and intended all along to be. That's what he's saying. So put off and put on. Let's replace the old life with a new life. And the language here is language of changing clothes. Take off these old clothes and put on new ones. Well, that's kind of odd. It seems a little superficial, right? Like cover up your flaws and your corruption with this new fancy facade. That's not the point. This is not like, hey, put on an outfit to enhance your image. We're not putting on clothes. We're putting on a new self, a new person. The one that Jesus created when he saved you. So why is he using clothes as a metaphor? Well, he's saying, hey, this new self has a visible outward component to it. Your visible way of life, your walk must be in conformity, must be compatible with what is actually true about you right now. Think, again, uniform, right? Think astronauts and firefighters and soldiers. Like what they wear coincides with what they're doing and who they are. It matches, it enables them to walk out a visible activity that coincides with their invisible identity. Paul is simply saying today, you were this, now you're this. Let's live like it. It's that simple. You were this, now you're this. Let's live like it. Let's put on the uniform that displays that you belong to Jesus. Look at 1 Corinthians 5:7. This is crazy. Cleanse out the old leaven, that's sin, that you may be a new lump, clean, as you really are unleavened, right? As you really are. Hey, cleanse out this old activity that doesn't match your new identity. Hey, be clean, because guess what? You already are clean. What a crazy way to talk. What a very intriguing phrase. Romans 6 says the same thing, and I want us to look real quick at this. Romans 6, 6 through 12. Your old self was crucified with Jesus, okay? It's crucified in order that sin would lose its power and be put off. You're no longer a slave. You've been set free from sin. So set free, like a prisoner released, okay? When a prisoner is released, they get rid of those old tattered orange scrubs. You don't keep parading those around, right? That's not who you are anymore. You've been set free. Now, verse 11, here's the kicker. How do we put this on? So you also must consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. Here's the key, you guys. Consider yourself. This is a counting word. It's a mental reckoning. Count yourself. Count it to be actually true about yourself that you're dead to this and now you're alive to this. I have a new way to live because I am new. And that leads to verse 12. Therefore, don't let sin rule you with its deceitful desires. See, mentally reminding yourself of who you are will lead to actually not being ruled any longer by sin. We have to mentally believe the truth of the gospel in order to live out the gospel, which is exactly what our last phrase in the passage today says. Verse 23, how do we put on the new self? Be renewed in the spirit of your minds. Be renewed in the spirit of your minds. Okay, earlier we saw what? Heart leads to mind, leads to life. As a Christian, we have a new heart, so where's the battlefield now? The mind. How do we change how we live? We already have a new heart. Where is the battleground? It is in our thinking. Okay? How do we change how we live? By renewing our minds with gospel truth. This is how we put on our new uniform. In counseling, we love to do something in the counseling room. Many of you guys have walked through this. We go through the pros and cons of sin. Like, list these out on this side, list these out on